Hi, folks. Welcome to another edition of the Omnist Hour. Hadn't planned on podcasting today, but we have another opportunity to do one before they tear apart the room, and remodeling the rest of the upstairs, the house required. Um, this podcast came up as a result of somebody asking me to comment on in another religious thread that I was commenting in on what I think of Pure Land Buddhism. And after doing a little bit of research on what it was, I answered the question, but I thought that it sparks a topic that I really haven't hit directly, and which I really should at this point, now that I've kind of given you so much background on how the new version of karma works in all my other podcasts. So basically, I'm going to entitle this one, Where Do Buddhists and Worshippers of the Goddess of Love Go? Okay, so this is a very good question. There are people that fall into spiritual beliefs, realms of spiritual focus that are at least a group or individual focused on a very narrow topic of the spiritual problem in its larger sense. Maybe a very human piece of that whole topic, but as I've told you, humanity is just one of many chosen species on a long road to defining what the perfect government, perfect set of laws for souls are in incarnation and in heaven. This is what reincarnation and karma are all about. And the physical experience is only one piece of it. There's a spiritual piece, and there is, yes, a God to it. Okay, so let's focus in on Buddhism first. Yes, there was a Buddha, an original Buddha who was the original one who came up with the idea, the basic idea that given all the conflict that was going on around him, the only safe move was to not play the game. And in fact, began to imagine that there would be a place where you could choose not to play the game. And the game being this eternal struggle between God and Borg, which generates the pressure that keeps creation going. Creation wouldn't happen without conflict. It's not a battle that, I mean, some people talk of it in terms of the battle between order and chaos, but it's really not that. It's the battle between unstructured, possibly destructive creation and very structured operation of what's already been created to preserve it and retain it. And this is more how to view this struggle between Borg and God. Borg likes things the way they are and wants to make sure no soul changes it. How does Borg do that? By assimilating them into its ideology of I make the rules, I control everything, I control the vertical, I control the horizontal, I am the God, I am the soul who should be the almighty master of the multiverse and runs their universe like the almighty master of their universe. And as you know, I say that when you reach God level, you finally become aware that we all have our own universe. At the lower levels, we don't know it's there. We just wink into it on occasion so that we don't commit an act that would muck up a bigger experiment in the universe where we are currently occupied. We don't run over Einstein. We don't shoot Hitler too soon. The event doesn't happen in one universe, and it does happen in the other. And, basically both universes are satisfied with the decision. And this is what the multiverse is all about. This is what virtual souls are all about. Okay, so the Buddhist heaven, which, yes, this original Buddha was not human, actually. I don't know what planet the original Buddha was from, but it was not Earth. Sorry, worshippers of Gautama, that was just another soul that came to the same conclusion and gravitated to the same general area of focus. And as with any other religion, the reason there are so many different sects of Buddhism now is there are different views of what the original Buddha meant, or follow on teachers that said, well, this is more of what Buddha should have said if he had been writing today with a wider range of vocabulary and a wider knowledge. And this is the path of all religions. They splinter and fragment as more gods come to awareness by service in that path. So there's a whole array of Buddhist universes that basically map to this thought of disconnection from the conflict, from the reality of struggle, pain, and suffering. Okay, so the Pure Land Buddhism actually looks like one of the more pure versions of Buddhism. What it believes is that if you basically follow the Buddhist path of neutrality, not doing evil, that you will be able to get to this essentially heavenly place of a Buddhist field. The answer I gave this, I think it was a young lady. I'm not sure. You can't tell by online names anymore. But basically, I told them that what they were envisioning and what that particular sect was all about was gravitating to one of the many religions, one of the many worship systems that basically follows the teaching of a God whose idea is too idealistic to be useful to creation. Okay, so how does that work, Rob? Well, so imagine if everybody was karma-avoiding Buddhists here today. Well, look what happened to the relatively healthy Buddhist-aligned state of Tibet when the Chinese moved in and basically overran the place almost without a fight. Okay, this is why Buddhism is an idealistic sect that does not work in a physical universe of conflict. And the physical universes are full of conflict. There are conflicts happening all the time. Cosmic rays hitting particles and causing them to have a decision how to react to it, what sort of particles they're going to split up into as a result of that interaction with another soul. The human race is full of conflict. What happens when somebody tries to take what you have and that's all you have? Ultimately, you're going to defend it, or you're going to give it to them and you're going to die. And the genes of your soul vessel will be eliminated from the gene pool. And because DNA is also a kind of soul, it has its memories too. And the soul memory of the DNA oversoul of the human race, loses some of its training. So basically, every time some asshole kills a Buddhist, you're losing some fraction of the energy of Buddhism, which is not a negative energy. It's not necessarily all that positive either, because anyone who had really positive energy when they were seeing what was happening in Tibet would have tried to do something to stop it, or at least now be opposing it and helping people to escape who wanted to get away from communist tyranny. Okay, so what does this heaven look like? Why is it there? What purpose does it serve? Okay, the universe of a Buddhist-aligned God and other types of gods that really don't have a physical reality that maps very well to their perfection. They're working on it. They still think it's possible. They basically have a universe that contains only a heaven. It has an attractive force based on all the souls that are running that heaven. And because it is a heaven, it's a spiritual level realm run by a god level person. So it's a spiritual God level realm. Very few souls rise above the spiritual level that they get there at because there's really no pressure to do so. It's a perfect place. You're perfectly happy. Because it's a spiritual world, spiritual realm, you can basically make it look, act like anything you want. You can see whatever you want to see, and you don't really have any need for food or anything. So all of the limitations of the physical world really do go away, but it's a very boring place because it's built upon the premise of this neutral God that you have to be neutral to go to this heaven. You have to be attracted to their resonance, which is resonance of neutrality. So the only souls that get to go there are the ones that pass their very high bar of, okay, are you really willing to commit to this neutrality stuff? Because we don't allow anybody to have a conflict or a big conflict or cause big problems here. That's not what this universe is about. We want to stay neutral. Now, what are the net effects of that? Well, it turns out that that's not as great a place to be as many souls think. In fact, there are still conflicts between souls there, only they can't express them. They build up those energies of disagreement within themselves, and that makes them less resonant with that Buddhist heaven till they get to the point where they feel like they want to reincarnate. They want to try out another life so they can explore a different heaven, because this universe they're in feels much less resonant when they got there. And so basically what a Buddhist heaven, a Buddhist universe does is provide sort of an R&R place for souls that have been really damaged by the conflict, so much so that they just want to get away from it. And, there's the great Krista Berg song, Say Goodbye to It All, which is a very good song for considering the Buddhist point of view. There's some point in all our lives where we feel like saying goodbye to it all. Now, that can be done through suicide. If you really want to end this life and have a chance to go on another one, but that has karmic consequences depending on who is going to be affected by your death. And so it's not something to be done lightly. The Buddhist way of dealing with it is saying, well, this is all an illusion. If I just stick to my principles, stick to my religion, keep meditating, keep myself from getting excited and becoming non-neutral in what's going on, then I will go to this special heaven of my Buddhist sect. And to the extent that you can maintain that through a life, that is where you can go. It's actually a place where they don't really let you live what you think is Buddhist heaven. There is a lot of conflict there. And the whole idea of this heaven, once it was established, the god of it knew what the real game going on was and would have been a fool to keep on denying the rest of creation. Denying that, well, my universe is only one of many that serves different purposes. And if I have a respect for what God has done, creating the whole thing and making a universe of creation for artists and scientists to contribute to and expand and grow and refine through evolution and testing, then I probably need to set my universe up as sort of an R&R, a place where souls can recover and be sent back into the battle with a better knowledge of what the game is. That it really is sort of a battle against souls that want to live an authoritarian existence where everything is, you're told what to do, when to do, what to think, how to think, and souls that want some freedom to do their own thing, to think their own thoughts, to defend their own creations. Okay, and so in general, the Buddhist heavens that are organized, whose gods are organized because they favor God's side more, tend to encourage souls to enjoy the time up there. If they're absolutely adamant about wanting to stay there, eventually they will say, okay, well, you've got to go serve in the physical universe. You've got to serve in reality for a little while. Sorry, you can't stay here forever. We're running out of cots or whatever. I don't know what they tell them. But at that point, they are told, well, you must incarnate again because, and it's probably because they violated the law or something. They got angry with somebody or expressed their ego in a way that wasn't allowed, which, as I've told you, the ego is not something you kill. It's not something that ever goes away. It's an inherent property of your soul that develops through reincarnation karma. It's not a bad thing. It is a thing that is you. You don't kill it because souls can't be killed. They're immortal. Okay, so they get encouraged to go back, and there's a place where Buddhists incarnate most frequently. Sometimes they want to go back. They actually want to get back in the action, and they'll even do something as challenging as come back as a human or one of the God level species. If I want this nirvana stuff back as soon as possible. What's the least painful and suffering way I can go back and incarnate and get back here? And they get a chance to incarnate in what scientists call the great voids. If you've done your research on astrophysics, you know that there is a weird phenomenon. They have noticed that there's this big place that one of them they've so far discovered where there seems to be almost nothing. No stars, no apparent black holes, just what could at most be a very, very light dusting of cosmic gas, hydrogen, and very, very low density. That's why they call it the Great Void. And that is the least karmic place that you can serve in physical reality. And what those souls that go there will find is that you're still dealing with the fact that eventually some cosmic ray is going to come and bombard whatever hydrogen atom you've become the leader of, whatever point in the God field that you're giving structure to, this is the whole reason for souls, is they provide structure upon which physical reality universes can be built. And at the lowest level soul that has really zero consciousness is the potential for something to happen at any given point in the multiverse. Okay, and that is a place that many Buddhists decide to go reincarnate again, because it basically seems like nirvana. You have zero consciousness. Everything is black around you. There's nothing going on, and you just have your own thoughts to yourself without any responsibility, without any needs or wants, and for eternity if you want to. And that serves a purpose by giving space to these great voids, which are a necessary place for training R&R, learning how to play the game or not. And it doesn't really matter whether you play the game or not, as long as you don't muck with the healthy expansion of creation. Yes, there is a need for more souls to do real work, but if you want to check out a reality semi-permanently, nobody's going to stop you from that. You'll find that if you're left to your own thoughts for a long period of time, unless you're as sharp as the first soul, well, even if you are as sharp as the first soul, that's where they started. God started just like that in Buddhist heaven and still decided to do creation. That's how desperate you can get for companionship when you're in nirvana. So knock yourself out, Buddhists. If that's where you want to go, there's a place for you. And it's not a bad place to spend a while and recover and go back to the fray, because everybody has some kind of a passion, some kind of a goal for their soul, artistic, religious, whatever it is. Even relationship goals can be your overwhelming goal is to find another soul that makes you happy for eternity. This is essentially what calls us to become gods. Because until you hit the God level, you're never going to find any soul that is completely resonant with you. So you start meeting them among the other gods. And God sex is a lot of fun. You start mixing your universes and playing new games that span universes. You're really playing at the God level then, when you're doing multi-universe experiments like God. So you develop very, very close relationships at that level, and you finally understand what a healthy relationship is about. Because gods don't mind telling other gods, "Get the fuck out of my universe." And they can, because it's their universe. And if nobody wants to play with a particular god because they're hard to deal with, what they end up with is a universe full of virtual souls. Zero-level souls being told what to do, when to do, how to do it, and for as long as they're needed in that universe, and then they get to graduate to becoming real souls. And by doing so, they carry along the experience of being used and abused for all that time and start the game as real souls at a higher level than somebody who hadn't had a chance to be a virtual soul, like one of the old gods, like God himself. So it's not a bad thing to start out as a virtual soul. In fact, all souls start out as virtual, since physical reality was created. Okay, so that's hitting the Buddhist side. There's another very popular idealistic religion right now, very popular among women and people, basically men who identify as women or who basically are beta male pleasers, who think the only way to get a good woman is to fall on your feet and do whatever they say. And this is essentially the spiritual component of the neo-feminist political movement. These are ones that, if you ask them about their spirituality, they will say, well, the Bible's full of shit. God was really a female soul. It's Mary of Magdalene was really Jesus. God had no sex at all. Of course, sex didn't exist in the beginning. All this stuff in the Bible is just patriarchal bullshit. But there is truth there, because we're going to achieve Christ consciousness through the intercession of Mary Magdalene. I don't know. There's a lot of different varieties of the goddess worship. This pure goddess worship is the result of a soul I call Lilith. Lilith is the soul that, if you listen to my other talking. So when God and Borg decided to do this experiment and create physical reality, they didn't incarnate themselves to start it. They created the first universe anti-universe pair. God's universe was led by a volunteer from his team, one of his very, very devoted senior children, which I name Lucifer. Who knows what his first name was, where he came from, what his long history was, but I'm telling you how he started serving physical creation by volunteering to be the first one to take the bitter pill of incarnation as a whole universe that had no rules, was just, okay, you're here in this little test tube, big test tube, and we're going to throw some other souls at you that have other ideas that might or might not be good, and you figure it out. And on the anti-universe side, that was led by not a volunteer, but, well, a forced volunteer from Borg's team. You will do this because we need a representative, and we're going to show those God people that authoritarianism is a better way to create what's right, what works. Takes the sharpest mind in the multiverse to know what's good or bad. And we can't have individual souls mucking around, throwing their ideas in the mix. This is how the Borg universe started. Now, what God knew would eventually happen is these two universes would mix. And in fact, some pieces of the mature multiverse run better with very deterministic processes, a very rigid system that you do this or else. And that's where a lot of the laws of physics come from. That's why we have things like the speed of light, Planck's constant, et cetera, because you can't muck too much with these things and have creation expand, physical creation expand, because physical creation, if you want to calculate the size of physical creation, okay, it's not only the sum total of the size of all universes in physical dimensions, but it's the total of time accommodated by those universes. Each universe has a certain timeline for its physical existence. And universes that are based on laws that don't work have a very short timeline of existence. That's why a universe that is evenly divided between antimatter and matter doesn't exist. It's not stable. Okay, so I want physicists to listen to this too and tell me if anything I say is wrong, and I'll modify it. I'm a physicist by background. I studied in Princeton. I dropped out after a couple of semesters of grad school because I didn't want to be in the academic world because it was so rigid and dogmatic. And what I really wanted to do while I was there was explore the wonderful library they had and get re-engaged with all the things that really motivated me. From youth, I was motivated by history and comparative religion and fairy tales and wondering what the truth was of all this stuff and how we had all these incredible ideas that were so fantastical. And this is how I landed up here. So I'm not going to tell you anything that's not consistent with physics that you can discover for yourself, and is being discovered very quickly these days with the most modern techniques. Okay, so where does the goddess universe fit in all this? Okay, well, gods and goddesses did not exist until sex was invented. Why was sex invented? Well, it was a really good way of mapping out this dichotomy between God and Borg's universe in a way that was less good versus evil, positive versus negative, but two different things that are both important to successful creation. Sex is the epitome of this struggle between God and Borg. And that's why the soul that developed into the goddess was the one that went into Borg's universe to start out the whole thing. The imprisoned one, the one that was told what to do, when to do, how to do it. And that is the archetype of female humanity. And much of the female species in other much of the female nature in other species, they tend to get dominated by males. And they're very vulnerable because they have a limited number of eggs. They have a limited ability to continue their genetics. And they tend, in most species, to be the weaker sex, certainly in ours. There are physical differences which make females weaker. In some respects, physically smaller, less muscular than men. Now, that doesn't mean that there aren't females who can beat the shit out of any guy, except for maybe, the cream of the cream top sports professionals. But the fact is that the norms are very different and the physical anatomy is very different. And it is through learning how to appreciate these differences, how to use them best to promote a species, to keep a species viable through extinction events, that creates the pressure that humanity has to evolve, that all sex species have to evolve. They're the quickest evolving species, and they're pretty much the only species that have evolved to move very far up the chain of the latest version of karma. They think about it. There have been other species that even plant species now have sex. That's how wonderful a thing it is. Even hive mind species have sex. Bees. It's kind of a weird dynamic because the only real female is the queen, or maybe some young ones in training in case the queen dies. But it's a very authoritarian system. This is a very bored species. And they serve a purpose. What would the earth be without bees to pollinate the sexual plant species? Okay, so the servants of the goddess, though, as a one god, the idea is that, everything was perfect back when the goddess was the only god, the triple goddess, and all the tribes were matrilinear and nobody had any wars and everybody got along and shared their food and la 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 la. It was utopia, Garden of Eden bullshit. Okay, there may have been isolated places, islands, wherever, where that was true, but ultimately population pressures created pressures on the resources available. And if there was any competition for them, let me tell you, females can be just as competitive as males, and will be, no matter how much they say they're unconditional loving. Thanks, Mom. This is the flat out truth, and that is why the goddess worship is an idealistic fantasy. Now, there are versions of the goddess that fall more on the Borg side and more on the God side, just like the Buddha. The Borgish goddesses tend to want to see the universe as only being perfect if every species becomes a hive mind. And these are the goddesses of the species that are the most troublesome in our own universe, in our own galaxy. They're the ones that are creating the pressure that's going to require us to develop to become a god-level species and go to war against them, because they are that set on making everything one big hive mind. With the queens at the top and everybody being the worker bees and the drones and so forth that does all the dirty work while the queens party and have a good time. And this is essentially what is going on in the uniparty utopias, even though it's not queens necessarily. It's little kings mostly at the head of these hive mind structures that are Orwellian utopias, like China, like they want to make the U.S. into, they want to make the whole globe into. They would like. There's a certain fraction of the global elite who thinks that what remains of humanity should just serve them, because they're so stupid, because they're obviously so less intelligent, so less advanced, that all they're good for is serving us drinks or working in our sweatshops. So long as we still need people to develop new technologies to market to the useful idiots and to serve our needs, till we have self-designing robots that we can occupy, and we can design our own utopia. And these people actually think they can become gods within this one incarnation, and they're working towards that. That's why there's so much effort in eugenics in China, trying to prolong life for the people that can afford it. That's why they're working on androids that can take a human consciousness and be downloaded into it. What they don't realize is that consciousness doesn't come from the brain. It comes from the soul. And they're nowhere near developing a link for a soul. Sorry, Elon Musk, you're on the wrong track. You can download all of your brain you want, and that won't be you. It just doesn't work that way. Okay, so this pure goddess worship, what purpose does it serve? It's kind of like what I told you about the Buddhist heavens. It doesn't make any sense, and it's very dysfunctional here to think that women could ever get along without men, or that everything would be perfect if women were in charge of everything. Absolutely absurd. You have only to look at interesting women like Hillary Clinton, Kamala Harris, Catherine the Great. Let's see, what's another? Marie Antoinette, to see that women are just as flawed as men. And in many cases, makes us more flawed because they're actually more susceptible to delusional marketing. This is why a large fraction of the marketing, commercial media, is directed at women. Larger fraction than what is directed at men, because women are more easy to sell on stuff. There are a lot more cases of a woman talking their husband into getting something that they really can't afford than a man talking a woman into getting something. Although it does happen in both directions, because souls are not male or female. They have both characteristics, and many souls have had a chance to occupy both male and female bodies. I have. I know it. Not very often. I became male identifying quite early in my soul's career. The only female incarnation I'm absolutely certain of was as some kind of a bear creature, which I experienced during my first ayahuasca ceremony, when this strange knowledge all started coming to me that I've been processing for the last 5 years. I felt breasts growing on myself. Felt what it was like to be this female bear and have this fully maternal instinct. It was a great experience. Didn't change my mind about identifying male, and I am as male identifying a person could be. Even though when I was young, I was a very sensitive, very thoughtful, very, quote, effeminate boy that might have been coached to trans if I'd been born today. And this is why I speak out against that issue, especially proselytizing among young children. This is evil. This is Borg activity trying to pull people assimilate them into your tribe. That's what Borg does. That's what authoritarians do. This is why this is evil. This is why the woke cult is evil. They're pulling souls against their will into their tribe by indoctrination, by propaganda. This is what communists do. This is what the global elite does, by trying to make you subservient to your device, by trying to make you want to stay in the metaverse forever. We've already talked about that metaverse whole thing and AI in the last talks. I'm not going to go there again. But what good purpose these things serve as is training places. Okay? If you think a female utopia is a perfect place, there are goddesses that run their universe like that. But they need males to reproduce in that universe. So sometimes you incarnate as a male and you're the underdog, and sometimes you incarnate as a female and you're the overdog. And you realize that, gee, not all females are created equal, and the leader of this place doesn't really give a shit about us other than trying to prove that females are the best. And that goddess is a very dark goddess that plays very close to the Borg side of the multiverse. And they serve the purpose of showing young souls just how stupid it is to give your soul, to give your energy to kowtow to an authoritarian regime. And most souls who spend a little time there can't wait to get out. Or maybe they swallow the Kool-Aid and they move up in the hierarchy and become the senior leaders of those universes. That's fine. That just provides more training pressure for the young souls that get there by accident. Now, there are other goddesses. Lilith herself gravitates towards the other side of, you know what? What is the most female god way of helping out this experiment we're in? Knowing that this male-female thing was a really good idea, but it's got a lot of problems still. This is why Lilith has become the goddess of sex, not love. Because love is a very hard thing to define, as most females know. The goddess of unconditional love is more like the pure Buddha. Well, I'm going to be unconditionally loving, so then I've got to think, what's the most loving thing to do at this very moment? Ooh, I've got this person, this person, this person. Ooh, how can I give them all love at the same time without pissing off one or the other? And it's one of these zero-sum games you just can't win. And it's a very frustrating place to be in that goddess of unconditional love's universe. But many people think that's nirvana. And you'll get to see just how flawed that idea is, just how absurdly idealistic it is. Now, there are other universes that don't have sex. They've given it up. They said, this sex stuff is the birds. We're not going to do that anymore. We can still be creative without sex. And that's already been covered. There's already a god that does that. That's essentially the original Buddha was a sexless creature. As I was telling you earlier, Buddha was not human. The original Buddha was another species that gave up the opportunity to have sex because they thought it would serve God to have a universe that didn't have that particular dimension of problem to worry about. And there are some souls incarnated in humanity that look at sex and say, what's the point? I'm not even attracted to either species, or either men or women. I have no interest in sex whatever. There are asexual humans, and that's because they are souls who are used to incarnating in this pure Buddha place. And they've chosen to come here because, who knows? They wanted to be involved in this event that's going on now. They suddenly realized sex was actually important, and they want to try it out. They never tried it. But they're afraid to because it's so weird when they get here. Because of reincarnation amnesia, they may not know that's why they chose this incarnation. You never know until you start waking up and understanding your past life history. At any rate, Lilith's universe is one of the R&R universes for damaged souls, especially for damaged souls that identify as males, because the goddess of sex is all about healing sexual dysfunction. That's her role. That's what she does there in her own universe, and that's how her team works in this universe. These are the people who will fall so in love with somebody, they won't care if they've got AIDS. They won't care if what sex they are. They just fall in love, and they'll do anything for that person, sacrifice their life. And they are the ones that are really showing us what love is all about, because of their willingness to sacrifice, not their desire to be the rulers. They know, because their goddess is a very honest one, that the universe that has the heaven that they're used to going to is a place that's not easy. It's not a happy place. You get a lot of tension, a lot of conflict coming and incarnating in the human species and carrying out a mission of sexual love. This is why back in the old god days and earlier versions of karma, in the Sumerian times, there were goddesses who had temples with priestesses who were dedicated to ritual sex. Any man or woman was free to go there And what happened inside the temple was nobody's business. Any children that were produced were considered children of the goddess and actually were admired and looked up to. And many women would want to go serve in the temple. So they would learn what sex was all about before they had a husband. So they would know how to make a husband happy and not be beaten all the time. This is truth. And this is why we need a system like that again. One that works better than illicit prostitution, which kind of serves that purpose, but as we all know, is fraught with a lot of dark things like women being trafficked into prostitution who have no interest in being in that role, but are just put there because, well, they make more money for us. There are people, there are women and men who are absolutely all about gratifying other people's sexual desires. There are prostitutes that absolutely love their job. I've met them. I've talked to them. And they have a very valid point of view. They see what they do as healing. And because they're so devoted to it, what they do is not just have sex, they actually talk to people. Find out what their fantasies are and see if they can fulfill them. Find out, if they have dark fantasies, see if they can steer them towards expressing them in a less violent way. This is what the goddess of sex and her devotees do. Most of her devotees are female. But there will be a growing number of males that realize, this is actually a holy thing to do if it's organized well and done well. And this is one of the new religions that I will be a most vehement defender of. It's going to take a long time for you to gain your place in the pantheon again. But this is what I'm predicting. This is part of the prophecies that are captured in my very first book. When I was just in the process of processing all this, and yet I already had laid out a pantheon, a new pantheon for humanity to become pantheistic again. Multiple gods, all manifestations of one God that gave every soul their own free will, their own free decision to worship what God they chose, change worship if their God no longer satisfied them, and keep trying to learn and grow through each incarnation under the rules of reincarnation and karma. If you want to go bad, go bad. You're only going to be hurting yourself in the long run, because if you get really bad, you're going to end up as a dark god in your own universe, all by yourself, surrounded by your toy soldiers. And that's where the dark goddesses are. That's where the dark gods are. Right next to Borg, trying to outboard Borg with a particular idea of, well, if authoritarianism was just organized this way, as a communist utopia, or as a woman utopia, or as a blah, 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 everything would be perfect. And of course, those things are not perfect. Every time they try to set up one, create one, it fails. And this is another piece of what I wanted today that I conveyed in my response to the young lady, is that in general, all gods and goddesses are able to choose a starting point for their universe. Now, what is that starting point? It's basically any one of the saved games of the official experiment between God and Borg. Okay? So while these two universes were connected, while this experiment was going on, both universes were developing. And the saved games happened when both Borg and God said, you know what? I think you won this round. It was always God that won, because Borg never wins. The whole point of it is for God to win, for creation to get more perfect. And all the days of creation thus far have been about that. We're in a very special day now, the seventh day of creation, as recorded by human prophets of the Bible. What they didn't tell you is that the seventh day wasn't a day where God was resting. It was a day where God was testing. God was physically incarnating in this new system, saying, hey, does this whole thing really stick together? Is it working? Are we creating new gods as quickly as possible? And are we populating this continuum between souls that like authoritarian systems and souls that like free will, very free system, to the extent that all of creation is expanding in every dimension exponentially? That's what perfect creation is about, is a healthy, expanding creation that is never ending, never gets to perfection. Anybody who thinks there is anything that is absolutely perfect is sort of anti-God in some way, is a Borg that thinks, nope, this is good enough. Let's stop here. Nobody do any more work. Don't do anything that I don't tell you to do because it's already perfect. And this is the dark Christian God. The Christians that tell you seventh day, oh, it's already perfect because God rested. They are worshiping the Borg. The God that is the heaven that's depicted in Isaiah of the Lord sitting on his chair and all the fawning angels of various levels with the 100,000 eyes and all this bullshit. That's Borg heaven. That's not God's heaven. God doesn't demand worship. Doesn't care. He'll get annoyed with you if you start, trying to bump into his universe and he doesn't want you there. He'll say, get the fuck out of my universe, bastard. I don't like your idea. And God is the one who gets to do the final test on the big, big laws that affect the whole multiverse. And that's what's been going on. Karma, in its last incarnation, is the biggest law that ever was made. Much more important than the speed of light, much more important than Planck's constant, much more important than all of the characteristics of the atoms and elements and et cetera, et cetera. It's more important than the physical forces because it is the government of spiritual forces, the final government, which is still evolving, but from here on out, it's like perfected enough that God says, knock yourselves out. I'm going to go chill out in my own universe for a little bit, and then we're going to go fight the eighth day of creation battle, which is taking this new idea that was developed in this test tube we call Earth, in this human species, which was chosen to be this test tube, the vehicle for the test tube, the crash dummies for karma, and we're going to take that and roll it out to all the other species that developed previous versions of karma that were not so perfect. We are going to be the ones teaching the old gods how to behave more responsibly. If you've read the stories of the old gods, they were nasty people. They fought each other. They had held grudges. They would destroy whole cities, destroy whole planets on a whim. Had absolutely no respect for any soul that got in their way. Those are some pretty flawed gods, and they need to be taught how to be responsible, and karma's going to do that if we have to kill them to do it. And we're not going to worry about killing souls like that because it's going to be kill or be killed. It's a serious battle. That's why we need to keep developing military technology, because spiritual technologies that were used in the old wars don't work anymore. Some of them will start working again now that God's awake, but only if you're on the right team and you understand how prayer really works in the new land of karma, with God fully awake again and ready to get back in the game with his full consciousness at the head of what's going to be effectively united federation of planets, galaxies, universes, et cetera, for as long as it takes to drive all the dark souls away from the better universes. What eventually will happen is this continuum of universes from God to Borg will gradually devolve into a whole bunch of universes clustered around the God side and a whole bunch of universes clustered around the Borg side, and accelerating away from each other's influence exponentially, so that there will be a decreasing amount of ability for dark souls to influence light universes. And the light universes won't have to spend so much energy fighting off dark souls. And that's how perfection will eventually become so close to perfection on one side or the other, according to the ideas of the souls that chose to be there, that will essentially be able to say, well, I think we can all do whatever we want. We don't really need to do any testing anymore. We don't need to go through all these cycles of first this God's got to test it, then he's got to go run it by karma and see how she evaluates this, and then they got to run it by God. That's how things work right now. It's a hard process to get an idea into production across the multiverse. And if it doesn't go in production across the multiverse, it gets isolated to one little pocket of one little universe. And that is not, contrary to what they're telling you, there is no Akashic record of everything known. This is a Borg concept. This is what Borg thinks would be perfection, as if my universe was the only one that existed. All the others had been destroyed by my minions, and I took all their information and integrated it into my hive mind. Okay? This is a bad idea, and this is why I speak against this cosmic oneness cult. And it is a cult. It's a Borg cult. It is worshiping Borg directly. It was created by Borg's agents to fool young souls at this time into going down that dark path of authoritarianism, thinking that I'm going to become one with the universe. There's more than one universe, okay? Which one do you want to be one with? I'm telling you that the only universe where you get to be one is the Borg universe. If that's where you want to play, if you want somebody to tell you what to do, when to do it, how to do it, every moment of eternity, knock yourselves out. That's what oneness is all about. Okay, I think this has covered that topic pretty well. Like, share, subscribe, ask questions if you think I missed a point or two, or you disagree with me, or just want to throw some darts at me and call me names. I really don't care. Till the next time, this is Rob Trump for the Omnist Hour.